You are listening to the Julie Parker Practice Success Podcast, where you discover management insights and strategies for a successful dental practice. There are also interviews with key people in the industry who have advice and services to help you and your team achieve great success. Welcome to this week's episode of the Julie Parker Practice Success Podcast. And I'm joined by a very special guest today, someone whom I've known for a long period of time. And she has been a teacher of mine and mentor. She probably doesn't even know she's been a bit of a mentor of mine, but she certainly has been. Dr. Linda Wilson, how are you today?
I am very well. There's a bit of sunshine in Melbourne, and that is a wonderful thing.
It is a wonderful thing. We have to count our blessings, don't we? Especially down here in Melbourne. Now, Linda is a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine, also a practitioner of energy healing. But the topic that I want her to concentrate on today, and it's going to be a bit of a free-ranging conversation, is around her being a stress management specialist. Linda, you know everything about stress. I want to talk to you about that today because I think our listeners will gain an enormous amount of value, both individually and as a team member part of the dental practice situation.
Yeah, well, it's the time of our lives with stress at the moment, Julie, and I think even outside of our current situation and condition, stress forms or has a major impact on us as individuals, on businesses and on our community as a whole. So it's always a topic that I'm very passionate to talk to people about because there is just so much that we can do to mitigate the impact of stress, not only on our individual lives, but also within our businesses.
And I think that's right. It's about mitigating the impact of the stress because we can't actually get rid of the stress, can we? You know, some level of stress is healthy for us. Is that right?
Absolutely. If we didn't have a certain degree of stress or some of those hormones that are associated with the stress response, we wouldn't actually get up in the morning out of bed. So we definitely need a certain degree of those, I guess you could call them activating hormones or, those neurochemicals that allow us to become activated, to motivate us, to move us into action. To a certain extent, short bursts of those are absolutely no problem at all. It's when we get into these low-grade chronic situations of stress or high-peak situations of stress that we start to lose our ability to recover, and that's when it starts to have an impact neurologically, but also in all systems of our body. So that's the kind of stress that I'm really speaking to businesses when I go in and have a chat to them about it.
Because you do work corporately in this space. You've even written this magnificent book, Stress Made Easy. So you know this topic very well.
I do, and I think it comes from, an understanding that in my own life there were periods of times when I didn't actually manage stress. And it also comes from the philosophy of traditional Chinese medicine, which is very much wrapped around us as individuals. What is happening in our mind is also occurring in our body and vice versa. So if that's the case, then what we actually need is tools to access both our intellectual capacity and our emotional capacity, but also our physical capacity so that we can create change.
I'd imagine that our personal management of our own stress that comes up in our life, is this one of those many things that we may not evolve unless we've gone on a bit of a self-awareness journey? We may still be responding to stress in our life the way we did when we were little children, the way we did when we learned it from our parents and the adults that were around us growing up.
Absolutely. So stress and our stress response is a learned behaviour. And the easiest way, I guess, to describe that is that, we could use a couple of words that are, for many people, are actually quite triggering words. So if I use the word cancer, for example, some people will think of an illness. And that can be, quite stressful, the thought of that. Other people will think of the star sign. And how is it that some people think of one and not the other? It's because of their learned experience through life. It's because of instances where that word has been used in particular situations, and a lot of emotion and meaning has been added to that word. So words in themselves are quite triggering and contain an enormous amount of emotion that we then respond to time and time again. And the other thing that happens, of course, is that when we have strong emotional responses, they are often hand in hand with strong physical responses. And of course, when we have both, we start to actually alter the way that our body operates, the way that our brain operates, and we start to be impacted by stress even more.
And I suppose if we don't start immediately, no time like right now, if we don't start shifting unhelpful emotional attachments to stress that occurs in life, to the triggers that trigger stress, we are re-anchoring that emotional response that makes the stressful thing stressful. Because as you said, the thing isn't the thing that makes it stressful. It's the emotional impact that we have applied to that makes it stressful in our world. Absolutely.
And of course, when we practice something over and over again, whether that be a physical response or an emotional response, an intellectual response, the better we get at it. We know this, we can see this very clearly. Say we wanting to learn a bike, the more time and opportunity and perseverance we have in terms of learning how to ride a bike, the better we get at it. And this exact same principle applies when we're having a stress response. And the way that this is recorded by the body over a period of time is in the way that our immune system functions, as one example. It's in the way that our nervous system responds in other ways. And it's also in the way that our brain actually responds. Whenever we repeat something over and over again, we're actually creating stronger neural pathways within our brain. And what happens, of course, is when you have a wide open pathway, it collects a lot of the neurochemicals that are produced, a lot of the hormones that are produced, the neurotransmitters, and they all rush down the bigger pathways. The more we practice our stress response, the bigger those pathways become, the more they attract the neurotransmitters of stress, as one example. And what this means is that we literally become wired, more susceptible and more open to those particular pathways being the ones that are triggered, as opposed to the ones that we're not practicing, such as how do I calm myself down when I'm feeling anxious or stressed? How do I ensure that I'm digesting my meal properly because I'm offloading my stress? There's so many different ways that it's important for us to recognize how stress is actually impacting us in all the various different areas of our physicality and our emotions.
Well, our responses to stress, because stress is always a part of everyone's lives, they can even impact our relationships. How we get along well with the people that we work with in the dental practice situation, how we're coming across to our patients. But coming back to the relationships thing, that's a big part of the enjoyment of life, how we get along with the people that we love, what kind of company we are, positive or negative company we are to the people that we love. And even with those key relationships, there's going to be stress triggers that come up even in those ones as well. And as we all know from our history, there have absolutely been relationships in all of our past that have been damaged because of our response to a trigger within that relationship.
Yeah, and I think what's important is that everybody recognises that we deal with our life, or we view our life through a particular lens, and that lens comes from when we were little people learning how the world operates, and the major influences on the way that our belief systems are formed and the way that we operate in the world come from the people that we were around in those particularly those first 7 years of our life. And then what happens is that we almost form a lens over our eyes, and then that's the way that we view the world from there on in, until we learn something different, or until we engage in different types of things. So if we wander through our life and just continue to, choose not to learn, or choose not to expose ourselves to other ways of thinking, other ways of dealing with our life, then we're just going to perpetuate what we already know. And the thing about human beings is that, we can be pretty pesky. And what that means is that when we're faced with another human being who doesn't see life the way that we see life, who doesn't respond the way that we think that they should or that they could or that is most convenient for us, we tend to see that person as the cause of our stress. And what we fail to do on some occasions is actually take responsibility for our own reaction, which is literally just one way to see the world. And so limiting our own stress, managing our own stress, and understanding that we have a particular frame through which we see the entire world is one of the most powerful ways to ensure that when we're interacting with others, particularly people that push our buttons, we have an opportunity, an incredible opportunity to perhaps take our own lens off and look at the world in a different way, through a different lens, and perhaps really learn something about the fact that every single human being on the planet is a little bit different from us.
Because that responsibility is so enormous, isn't it, when it comes to the kind of person that we evolve into, or the kind of person within us that is revealed. That sense of responsibility over that self-awareness journey. And quite often you hear the terms such as, I'm just an angry person, I'm just impatient, I'm just this, I'm just that. We've labelled ourselves this thing, in essence saying, I'm not willing to do anything about that. I'm not willing to shift and change an unhelpful behaviour to get a better result. And I often quote this one phrase, even though I hate where it came from. But I heard this years and years ago. I read it in a book, and it said, all these unhelpful behaviours, and then the response is, and how's that working for you? And I think that every time you hear of somebody saying, it's just the way I am, it's just the way you are, and how's that working for you? Because it's a bit of a pattern interrupt phrase. It actually came from Dr. Phil, which is why I don't like to say where it came from. It brings down the credibility.
Yeah, and I think in many ways, Julie, I think because it's so annoying, it has actually created a lot of discussion, and it is actually an excellent way for us to assess ourselves and perhaps gently question other people. You have to be very careful when you introduce that as a response to anyone. But what it actually really says, there's two sides of looking at that. One is we just label ourselves and, we decide that that's who we are. And, that's one response. Another response could be to ask that exact question, how is that working for you? And there are two answers to that. One answer is it's working really well, and that's why I'm going to choose to perpetuate it. The other answer is, okay, well, actually, it's not working that well, so I want to change it. And, then we might seek out resources to do that. But the person who says, actually, I'm doing okay being that kind of a person, it is because essentially there is a gain from perpetuating that same response, from perpetuating the behaviour that's associated with it. It could be that it puts you in a position of power. It could be that it alienates other people, and therefore you actually get your way, or you get some distance from people. There are so many reasons why some of those perhaps more negative traits that we hold on to, so many ways that they serve us. And certainly the reason that we hold on to us is because, onto them rather, is that there is a way that we're being served by our stress response or by the behaviour that we have associated with it.
Gosh, you're absolutely right. We don't do unhelpful things unless we're getting something out of it. And sometimes that something out of it is I get a bit of attention, or it validates me, or it means I don't have to take responsibility over that thing because somebody else will sweep in and save the day for me.
Yeah. One of my most controversial quotes that came out of the book is stress is a lazy response. And it's very provocative, and people can get very, very upset with me when they hear me say that. But the reason that it is so so powerful and so provocative is because we do have this really sort of, what is she saying? You know, is she calling me lazy? Well, to a certain extent, I guess I am, because what it illustrates is that we have chosen to be at the mercy of our stress. We have chosen to just lazily make that choice for ourselves rather than perhaps do the harder work that's associated with making a change, educating ourselves, looking at why it is that we need to continue that behaviour, what it is that we're actually getting out of it, and if it's the best way for us to move forward in our life.
I love that when you said be at the mercy of our stress, and I think that's where the crux of it is, isn't it? This will be the turning point of our discussion, because we don't need to be at the mercy of our stress.
I think that there are so many tools out there these days, and many of them are well known by most people. And I think the dilemma has been, Julie, that it's kind of become, many of these, I guess, tools and techniques have become sort of just the thing that's thrown on the end of the sentence. And the dilemma with them, and I'm talking about things like meditation, for example, exercise, all of those things that we've all heard before, stretching, being in company with other people, patting an animal, there's so many things that we've all heard are so good for us, and they're out there in social media world and out in the community, and they're very well recognised. But I think what's happened is we've actually gotten a little bit lazy about, well, why do those things actually work? And what the amazing thing about technology and the advancement in Western medicine these days is that we can actually look at our brains and we can map why these very simple interventions that most people can access, why they actually work. And the reason that they actually work is because they change the balance of the neurotransmitters in our brain, which then alters our nervous system and alters our stress responses. And we have a whole system benefit from actually doing that. So, I've always encouraged people to ask the question, well, why does exercise support me? What does it actually achieve for my body? And for anybody who's interested in that, it has a twofold effect, has a multiple effects, but twofold effect in terms of the processing of our stress hormones. So if we're physically moving our body, and it doesn't have to be a prescribed form of exercise, it could literally be just walking around the house or the office or around the block, we're metabolizing those neurotransmitters that are causing our stress response. So we're breaking them down faster than if we were just sitting in a puddle and ruminating over them and stressing more. So that's one thing that exercise does. The other thing that exercise does is it actually enables us to release and respond to those neurotransmitters that are actually really helpful for us. So, a little bit of dopamine creeps in there, and a little bit of love for the, serotonin and oxytocin can often be released as well, particularly if we're out there with people that we enjoy spending time with. So, choose whatever it is that for you actually enables you to make some change. And what you're doing in that, you're actually being a scientist. You're actually, practicing a form of brain science, and by getting out there and actually shifting and moving your body as just one example of all of the things that we can do to create a change.
And it's about getting action done. Just get up there and do something different, isn't it? Because our default is just to go back to our default all the time. The responses, no matter how unhelpful they might be, we find ourselves repeating them endlessly, thinking to ourselves, why on earth can't I just make a shift and change in the way I think or what I do and my responses to stress? But I just keep going back to the same place over and again. That's just the way we are by human behaviour.
Yeah, and again, it's learned in the same way that our stress response is a learned learned behaviour. That is the behaviour that we return to. It is a learned response. And as I mentioned before, the more we practice that same behaviour, literally the more attention it receives in our brain, I guess is an unscientific way to describe it. So, we can intervene though. We can turn those, 6-lane highways within our circuitry in our brain into, a goat track. And we can, through perseverance and practice and intentionality, actually build 6-lane highways to calm, rested, healthy immune system, healthy immune response. And what it takes is literally just making a decision that you want to make a change and that you want to be consistent and persistent, so that you build out your brain in a different way. And that often means letting go of some of those behaviours, some of those responses that have worked in the past. And we have to make an active choice and decision that we're no longer going to use those as the way we're going to move forward in our life.
And it can, for example, I'm thinking about the dental practice situation and the kind of stresses that go on in dental practices. One of the big ones is that, you've run out of a certain material, or the lab work hasn't arrived for that patient, or I can't find all the bits and pieces. Someone else has been in my surgery and everything's in disarray. Maybe the patient's running late. Maybe you're running late for the next patient. Maybe you're in the middle of a conversation and you're trying to get through it, but the phone's rung 3 times. You've had to keep interrupting what you're doing. Also, people rubbing each other up the wrong way. When inside a dental surgery, the dentist and the assistant, and one could be stressed about what's going on in the surgery with the patient, and so then they respond unhelpfully, and then the other one responds in kind, and it gets worse and worse and worse. So there's, as in any workplace, I imagine, there are many opportunities for stress. I've told these people to do things time and time again, they're not doing it again, but it is our response that can shift and change our management of the situation, and that in turn changes not just our experience of it, but it can have an impact on how everybody else then responds to my response to stress too. So your knock-on effect may be quite substantial.
Absolutely. And, there's different ways that we can manage this. So quite often people need tools right there in the moment, and they're often the most powerful ones, because what those instant tools can do is literally break the circuit of our response to a trigger of some kind, whether it be, the way that someone's spoken to us, all of those scenarios that you mentioned, Julie. And the easiest one that I would point out for people to try is something that we're doing all the time anyway, and that is actually to just pay attention to our breathing. There's an incredible amount of research that shows the way that we breathe has a very dramatic impact on what's happening in our stress hormones, in the neurotransmitters in our brain. And that is because if you think about it, when we're anxious, when we're stressed, our chest tends to tighten up. We tend to become more shallow in our breathing. It's like that fear, flight, fight response is alive and well in our system. But when we are relaxed, we're actually taking longer, slower, deeper breaths, and our body is calmed by breathing in that way. So if you happen to be on the spot, what I really, really recommend for people is try to take some big, deep breaths. And that is breathing in, hold for a count of 3, breathe out nice and slowly, hold for a count of 3. And just, you only have to do that a few times, and you will actually start to deal with some of the automatic responses that we have in a stressful situation. I know it sounds simple, but the research is out there for how dramatic an impact just taking some big, deep breaths can have. There's a way of breathing that's called box breathing. It's been described in lots of different ways, but that's a great way for people to look it up. Or square breathing is the other way it's been described. Have a look at that. and see if you can practice it. Just test it for yourself and see if it makes a difference. My bet is that you will notice quite an instant difference. And I guess the other thing that I would point out about this, because stress is a normal part of our working lives, and being triggered by other people's emotions or situations within the workplace is it's kind of a given in the ways that we work these days and our work locations. But what is the antidote to that? The antidote to that is actually continuing to build our relationships with the team members that we work with. And often in the situation, it's extremely difficult to suddenly want to have, a bit of a more personal chat with someone that we're working with. And so what we need to do in those situations is just make a little bit of a mental note, take our deep breaths to calm ourselves down. And outside of that intense scenario or that intense situation, we need to start building bridges between those people that are involved in the situation. Now, whether that be a supplier, whether that be a client, whether that be someone that we work with within our particular practice or our workplace. Building bridges and having clear communication and discussing these things in a non-emotional way outside of a stressful situation is the most powerful way to create change. And, these conversations don't have to be confrontational. They don't have to be judgmental. They don't have to be accusory. They can simply be, you describing what's occurred and how it's impacted yourself, and asking the other person, just being curious about what's happening for them and how could that be different or how could that change. I could go on about this for a long time, Julie, because I do a lot of work in businesses, and all I can say is that building those relationships out is the way to really put a stop to a lot of these unintentional responses that we have with other people.
Yeah, because sometimes in the moment the response can not be helpful. It doesn't mean it's a full stop at the end of that. We can extend that out and add to it a helpful sub-response, which is coming back into that communication with a fresh heart and trying to find the helpful resolution. Yeah,
and I think, when you build relationships with people, professional or personal relationships, there's agreements that come with that. And, these agreements, too often I think, Julie, we don't actually speak agreements out loud, or put them down on paper is a far more formal way of doing it, I guess. But if we actually speak these agreements out loud, then we're making a much more conscious commitment to creating change, as an example. And that is the direct opposite to us just assuming that everybody in our life sees the world and is going to respond to the world in exactly the same way that we do. There's an enormous amount of assumption that happens, and that assumption is what can get us into really deep water. So we do need to be very careful about that.
Yeah, we really don't understand people that don't understand the world that we understand it to be like.
Yeah.
We don't know where they're coming from.
Exactly.
And as Charles Coves, my husband and the co-founder of Julie Parker Practice Success, he always says we're all weirdos. We have wildly different experiences and beliefs, and even twins, he says, they have not had an identical experience of life either. And so when someone delivers to us a response that doesn't quite make sense to us, it just means that they're a weirdo like we are.
Absolutely. And one of the most powerful tools that you can ever have as an individual is participation in curiosity. So, my thing about not understanding situations is just to keep on asking questions until you can find a way to, you may never agree with it, But until you can find a way to actually understand why it might be occurring for another person or within yourself. And, we all know that knowledge is power. And therefore, if we have a deeper understanding of the people that we work with or the situations that we have to deal with in our workplace, we are far more likely to find solutions. And that's got to be a powerful thing within any workplace, because workplaces, whether they be remote, whether they be in person, whether they be in offices or any other location, thrive when the people in them are connected, are respectful, have agreements, and take responsibility for maintaining those agreements and those relationships.
Yeah, and I think because we are all so different and our expectations and responses and the way we manage life is so different, I think developing those agreements and agreeing on the agreements moving forward with the whole team, having the whole team equally responsible in formulating those agreements is a wonderful thing. And one of the suggestions that I have with dental teams that I work with is when we get to that moment in an interaction with somebody else, and I think you'll know what I'm talking about when I say it, you feel like, oh, we've crossed a line, this isn't helpful communication anymore. You can feel your own emotions rising. Maybe you can see the emotions rising in the other person. And we so often feel like we can only put a stop to that path if we have a solution or we have the wise words or we have the whatever. We don't need that. All we need to say in the moment, and this is a wonderful thing to put into practice to recognise that it's the best next helpful thing to do, is to call it out in the moment, or as close to the moment as you can get. So if you and I were having an interaction and it then tipped into, we're up against each other now, we're butting heads, as they say, to actually say, oh, can you feel that this is not helpful anymore? Okay, let's back off a bit. Tell me what's going on for you. What are the unspoken things that you're not telling me? And I'll share what's unspoken with me as well. And stop having that attachment to we have to leave this situation with a solution. No, we just need to leave this situation shifting from some unhelpful communication into discovery.
Yep. I absolutely 100% agree. And I think that sometimes the naming of what is actually going on is the way to really disperse that energy. So if you see that a person is becoming quite angry or you see that a person is becoming quite upset, sometimes it's okay to just say, oh, look, I really feel like, maybe this is something that we need to talk about, but maybe now is not the time because I can see that you may be feeling angry or upset. Do you want to continue? Sometimes terminating conversations when there is too much emotion is one of the most powerful things we can do. And I think this is a very individual situation, Julie, so it can be a little tricky to judge this. But sometimes when there is that kind of emotion in the room, it is the most powerful time to really be a stand for what could become a resolution to the issue. And by naming what's happening, by actually bringing it out into the light of the day, rather than it feeling kind of a covert or I'm too scared to name what's happening, that can be the most transformative thing we can ever do.
Yeah, and we do, it might be just me, I'm hoping it's not just me, but there are so many scenarios that I can reflect back on that everyone's throwing around different ideas on how to achieve a better result for this particular topic, or I'm in communication with one other person who's sharing their belief and I'm sharing my belief. I do quite often have an attachment to, I need to leave this conversation being right.
So true.
Being the one who wins the conversation. Yeah.
And, as I said, human beings are pesky, aren't we? We're very, very pesky. And I think that, this can particularly happen, Julie, with business owners because it's their baby, it's their passion, it needs to run the way that they want it to run, and there can be no other, that's the direction that we're going in, and everybody needs to fall in line. And I think that what's required there is really a unique consciousness around the fact that hopefully all of the people in our team are there because we do feel that they're making a really great contribution to our business, but that also we need to open ourselves up to what else perhaps they could bring to our practice or our business that is actually going to be bigger than our own personal vision for what we have. Human beings are pesky, but they're also brilliant. And when we have our own tunnel vision, our own lens that we're looking through, it does cut out opportunity. It does cut out other forms of creativity and contribution. And this is where those personal relationships become so incredibly important. When we have the capacity to interact with a person and have a dialogue with a person that is on a very human level, then what we're creating is also a great deal of trust. And trust is important for all the reasons that we already know, but it's particularly important when what we're asking for from our teams is for them to be able to have a voice. Doesn't mean that what they're saying is going to become the next big project, but it could mean that what they're saying becomes the next big project that is going to grow a business. So for all the reasons that we need to work with ourselves, this is one of the major ones, is that we want to open our businesses up and we want to open ourselves up to all the potential that is hidden in the people around us. And that definitely means that sometimes we have to accept that we're not always the smartest person in the room. We don't always have final say, and we should not expect that we're the only person that has an opinion that matters.
Hooray, that's for sure. And certainly it's all the business books out there, they talk about the fact that you should be hiring people who have their strengths where your weaknesses are. So you don't want to be the smartest person in the room on every topic when you've got a staff meeting going on. Hopefully you are hiring people who have got particular training, experience, years of wisdom that's been collated over a period of time in all the very many facets that make up a very effective and successful dental practice.
I think the best business owners are the ones that recognise that contribution from others is the most powerful thing that they can actually leverage from their teams. And that means that you must be able to have an open dialogue. It means you must have those respectful professional relationships. And it must mean that outside of your professional relationship, you can also have a respectful personal relationship that allows those professional relationships to continue to flourish. Our egos as business owners are definitely the things that are going to let us down. And I think to be that person who is able to accept that they don't know everything about everything really puts us in a far better position to thrive and to help our teams thrive as well.
For sure. And it is one of those situations where, I believe every person is a leader within an organisation. Anyone can lead by example of what good professionalism looks like, what good presentation looks like, what great customer service looks like, what great leadership looks like. But when we're talking about the leaders of an organisation that do have a stronger sense of control over the culture of the team that everyone's working within, what steps can we take? What's important to consider when we're trying to improve the way the individuals and the team as a whole manage stress throughout the day?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And, I probably am going to sound boring, but it always comes back to our understanding and appreciation of the people that we're working with. So I do a lot of work with groups and teams around identifying why it is that they're even doing the job that they're doing. Because you and I both know, Julie, that, our work life forms a part of our life, but it is not all of life. There is a balance that it brings to us as individuals, but of course that balance can be very, very easily interrupted by the choices we make around how important our personal life is, compared to how important our professional or our working life is. And we do need to be very careful about getting that balance right. So for business owners or team leaders even, understanding the motivations of their people, why do they even have the job that they do, gives them great insight into how that particular team member can be motivated, for example, or how that particular person can be kept activated and contributing to the team. Understanding how each and every one of us ticks and what it is that makes us being in our workplace important to us is the key to really growing and expanding those connections between team members. And everybody who has great teams knows that there is this kind of accumulative, synergistic effect when people work really well together, as opposed to a whole lot of individuals that have no connection. So, that was a long answer to what could have been a short question rather. And that is, understanding why people are in the jobs that they're in, what is the motivation for being there, and how can you as their boss or their leader, keep that motivation high for them so that what they're contributing is exactly what your business needs. That's a real skill. And I highly encourage all business leaders, all leaders out there to really work out how it is that they can understand their people and their motivations better so that they can create a workplace that is really leveraged in terms of the energy, the motivation, and the focus and direction that you're moving in.
Oh, excellent. I mean, one of the common phrases that I think a lot of dental practices hear or say over the years, and again, this would happen in every business, is a certain individual is fulfilling their tasks for the day, and the response is, well, so they should. That's what they're paid for. And so that limits the amount of gratitude we have for them fulfilling that role in the first place.
It really does. And, I think that one of the best things that we can do as leaders within our business or our community is really to acknowledge those things that people do well. Because, I know for myself, and I'm sure you've experienced it, Julie, when we are acknowledged for the smallest of things or the biggest of things, what it does is it actually builds our sense of worthiness. It builds our sense of self-respect. It builds our confidence. And wouldn't you want all of your team members to have that sense of themselves and that sense of their contribution? So expressing your gratitude and thanks to every single person in your team at any time, at random times, can actually be the most powerful way to acknowledge people. It really does build trust, and it helps people to feel encouraged that what they're doing is making a difference. And we all want to make a difference.
Yes, reward the behaviour you want repeated. It's quite a mindset shift, isn't it? Rather than just identify the things where people could improve in or where they're falling down, stop mentioning that stuff for a period of time and see what the impact is if you all of a sudden started verbalising your gratitude and admiration for the things they do well.
It's really interesting, we do that with our kids, or I know it's one style of parenting is that you reward the behaviour you want to be repeated. I really do think that human beings thrive under that kind of attention and given that kind of feedback, because what it is it's building in more of those powerful emotional responses that we have that then expand out those neural networks that we have in our brain. The stronger an emotional response is to any particular situation, the stronger the neural network within our brain. So if you are spending time praising your team, your staff for the things that they are doing right, what you're effectively doing is building those strengths into their neural network, into their emotional system, their nervous system. And that is a super powerful thing that we can do. And as I said before, those pathways, those highways in our brain, the bigger they are, the more attention that we have in relation to those. So wouldn't you want those positive behaviours, those excellent ways that your staff or your team members are responding to be the way that the brain moves for them naturally. I don't know if I explained that well, Julie, but hopefully that makes sense to people.
Yes, you did explain it beautifully well. And I've always considered the level of self-confidence of somebody has, and I mean, not just me that says this, but the level of self-confidence that somebody has is directly linked to the performance that they can roll out. And we know this consciously. You say to somebody, do you think a great performer is high self-confidence or of low self-confidence? Everybody would say high self-confidence. And how do you train them, and how do you treat them when they make a mistake, and how do you treat them if they were to slip up in any way? Oh, in a way that would actually reduce down their self-confidence, but I still want the high self-confidence performance. So we have to start, reassessing how we do manage things, because just like we react to stress as the way we did when we were a child and learned as a child, unless we have evolved through that process and adopted a more adult response, a smarter response maybe. So too, the way we interact with our staff members if we're an owner or a manager, or the way we interact when we are colleagues, that's all learned behaviour too, not always helpful. So it's worthwhile taking that self-reflection step and thinking to ourselves, the way I am interacting with the people around me, is it getting the best response? And if it's not, I wonder what that best response would be. If I want this result to happen, what does my response need to be? I'm going to commit to going down that path.
And I think another great way to really reflect on this is to actually put ourselves in go through a memory exercise, and that is to go back to those times when we actually felt heard, or when we felt acknowledged, when we felt worthwhile. What was the other person saying to us? How were they treating us? How were they acknowledging us? And recognizing that emotional response we had is something that we want to actually supply or provide for other people because of how good it made us feel. I think we tend to forget too easily, Julie, our own positive responses, and we do revert back to those old management styles that perhaps are a little bit more overbearing or negative, shall we say, than the more positive ways that we can get responses from the people around us.
And what is your advice? COVID has created a lot of unusual new stress in our working environments. How have you found you're working with teams? What has been some of the strategies that you've shared? What's been your experience in that space?
Yeah, it's for us, our team is a very mature team in lots of ways, and by that I mean many of our team members have been with us for many years. So we have, quite a deep personal relationship with them as well as professional relationship. So for my team, and the way that I communicate with my team is I always start with the personal first. Even if we've got a really pressing meeting that needs to happen, pressure is on everybody, even if there's something that really needs to get done, I always make sure that I check in with people personally. How are you going? What have you been up to? How are the kids? I have that relationship with my team. I appreciate that not all business owners or team leaders have that particular relationship, but it is about connecting as much as you can with the fact that the person opposite you is an individual who has a life outside of the workplace, and that life can be impacted by everything that is going on, and a simple acknowledgement of the fact that you are aware and you value who they are over and above what they do for you. And I think that's a really important point. You actually you want that person to participate with the fullness of who they are, all of their skills, all of their creativity, and the only way you're going to actually access that is if you know who they are.
I love that. You value them over and above what they do for you. I'm going to use that quite often.
Yeah, go for it.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And I agree. I think, again, it's one of those situations with the COVID situation where we think we need to have the solutions in order to enter into those sort of conversations. How can I ask someone to open up about how they feel about it, just to leave them hanging without giving them some kind of safety net? But the safety net itself is being there for them, having them able to get the stuff out of their mouth. There was a great book written years ago by Dr. Irene Kasola, and it was called Putting It All Together. But within it, one of the lessons that I learned that I've taken with me through my life is whatever troubles us, we need to get it out of our mouth, and that in itself is helpful.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about this in terms of our unhelpful emotions or our negative emotions, or indeed, in relation to really extreme examples such as suicide, Julie. They do know that when a person is courageous enough to share what they're actually experiencing, then the chances of them actually following through with some tragic act decreases. So, I think the other thing that is really important here is acknowledging to our teams and our staff that we also are human, and that perhaps we're also struggling. We might be studying and struggling. I think, that aspect of us not always having it all together, which I think is something that we are taught we should do, it's really outdated. It's really not helpful. It certainly doesn't help to engender trust and create openness within teams when the person who is leading that team is like some superhuman who has no emotions. We are far better off being human and dealing with the other humans in our lives in a really open and transparent way. And that does include the fact that sometimes we might be having a bad day or a bad moment, or acknowledging that perhaps we haven't handled certain situations as well as we would have liked to. So for business owners and leaders, sometimes we really need to put our big girl pants on and fully acknowledge by saying out loud some of the stuff that's really real for us in our own lives.
Yeah, because there's that perception that I'll come across as weak. I'll be perceived as weak if I show that I'm struggling a bit with the COVID situation, or that I don't have the answers to everything, or I'm stressed about this element of the business and I don't know where to turn with that. But when you come in vulnerable, it's been my experience that only positive responses have been the result. When vulnerability kind of comes to the table, it's our own kind of natural human response to be empathetic to that person.
Yeah. And I think it just opens up a whole different level of conversation. And in this time when we are incredibly disconnected, both physically but also emotionally, anything that really facilitates a closer and more transparent emotional connection is a really powerful thing. And the other thing that I would really recommend, Julie, is how can we make things fun? Not to deny that things are hard, but literally just to break some of that energy, because I know that for my business and my team, sometimes we're sitting in, really heavy energy. Sometimes the situation around us can be very difficult to carry or to bear. And I think that introducing a little bit of lightheartedness, a little bit of banter and some fun alongside of, being open to having some of those more personal and supportive conversations, that's a great combination.
Yeah, we don't have to have our foot down on the accelerator the whole time through life. It's just exhausting. We're not designed to do life that way. And we do need to have the breaks. And we need to remind ourselves that life can still be enjoyable, can still be fun, and there is still some levity to have there. Otherwise, we lose all hope.
We do. And hope is, a really foundational part of what human beings need to keep moving forward. And let's face it, I've already said a number of times, human human beings are pesky. We are such curious creatures, and I think a quirky sense of humour is a very, very powerful leadership tool. As long as we're respectful of the fact that, yeah, sometimes maybe our sense of humour is not somebody else's, but that's part of finding out who other people are, how they tick, and how we can motivate them and facilitate them to be to contribute in the way that really makes a difference to the business.
I love it. I'm just picturing, getting the team together for a brainstorming session and people start cherry picking the common things that create stress in the working environment. For example, when the dentist is running late for the next patient, and just sharing ideas and what other dental practice team members have experienced in other practices that they may have worked in order to have a better result in that kind of situation. What ideas are we going to share around? And as you say, let's get back to some agreements on this is how this practice manages running late.
Yeah.
This is how this practice manages COVID, for example.
Yeah. And the way that works is if you have developed trust with your team. Most people in our business, or a proportion of people in our business, have worked in other locations. And, your people are an incredible resource if you give them a voice. And I 100% agree with what you've just said, Julie. Opening it up so that the problem doesn't belong to just one person, but it belongs to the team, because what we're building is that leveraged synergy, that momentum within the whole team. And sometimes, the resolution to some of these issues can come from the strangest and weirdest places. One of the most wonderful things that I've heard and that I really take to heart is some industries solve these problems in a really different way to our own industry, for example. And we can go to other industries and look at the way that they do things and incorporate those solutions into our own business. I really wish I could give you a concrete example. Or maybe one will occur to me, but I like to think about each human being as an industry of their own, and they have experiences, they have resolved problems, solved problems in their own unique ways, and so they can bring that knowledge into our business, and we should be really mining those experiences for what they can add to our business.
Absolutely. One thing that has occurred to me as you were talking about that, one of my long-term clients, they are Peruvian, and so they, whenever they have for a start, they party big time. They don't understand Australians who all gather together for a party and then stand around and just chat like, what are you doing talking? Why aren't you dancing?
Love that.
But another wonderful thing that they've brought into their team, which has been, in my experience, magnificent, has had a great impact on the team, is at every practice anniversary, at every Christmas, any celebration that they have throughout the year, and they have everyone gathered together, they will go through and have every team member stand up and say a speech. They're like, this is what we do in Peru, you must do it here. And at the start, some people are like, oh, my God. So the more confident ones get up first, and then everyone feels a bit more confident in getting up. But what happens in those moments is the gratitude.
Yeah.
And I've always been surprised by some of the people's responses and the things that they say because usually, you get up for a speech and you say, if it was the anniversary of the business opening, you'd say, I love working here because of this. I love the team because of that. Maybe for Christmas time, it's more of an interpersonal thing. I really love working with you, Joy, because you're so glorious. Every time I walk in the door, I feel happy that I'm here. And the comments that have come up over the years by various different staff members, it makes you understand the deeper experience that people have within a work environment than you could sometimes normally think. They're having deep experiences, like their deep friendships or family member experiences with the people that we're working with. And I think giving everybody the chance to say that is a wonderful thing, but for the whole team to hear that this is the impact I'm having on the people around me, I think that's important.
Oh, I 100% agree. And the flip side of that is if you are actually having trouble in your teams, or if there is a lack of cohesion, or there seems to be behaviours or disruptions that you're not sure how to manage, it's so valuable to get somebody into your business, such as yourself, Julie, who can really help to nut out and break down where those disconnects are happening. And to facilitate the change in behaviour and that exchange of the positive, so that you can really shift through whatever it is that's going on, and hopefully break through into better business, bigger business, and happier business. But I agree with you; those simple acknowledgements of how you as an individual are feeling, the ways that other people make you feel, and your appreciation for that, it's very, very powerful.
So I guess everything's an evolution, isn't it? Embrace the evolutionary journey. Don't think that this is just the way this team is. This is just the way that I am. Recognise that we have got the power to get far better results in our worlds, in our life, in our practices, and with our interactions with each other. It doesn't have to remain the same the way it is right now. I wonder what my life would look like if I got better results in these different areas, and jump onto that journey, embrace that journey, get excited by the journey. I mean, a few episodes ago on this podcast, I spoke about the Johari window. Start asking the questions. I don't know myself as well as other people know certain elements about me. Are there any areas of communication or connection that I can improve in? I want to improve. What a great example that is as a business owner for the whole team, that I'm on this improvement journey. Why don't you all, improve with me, and we all get better and better and gain greater experiences from each other?
Yeah, I think you touched on it before. Often when we share what we're doing, people can often see it as a weakness. So, for example, if someone says, "Oh, I'm actually off, doing some of my own personal development because I want to strengthen this aspect of who I am, or the way that I handle this particular situation," that is an invitation to everybody else around you to open up and say, "Oh, actually, I wouldn't mind doing that." Or it creates that human connection. It means that you are a human being, and that you are, you're exploring your life. You're using your curiosity to be a lifelong learner, and you are shifting some of that tunnel vision that we bring with us as we move through life, so that your lenses are clearer, so that you can see things in a more open and transparent way, and so you can shift those behaviours in yourself that will create the biggest transformations in your life.
I love it. I love it. This has been such an enormously valuable discussion, Linda, and I really am appreciative of it. And I think it will really start to have the listeners out there consider how they manage stress themselves individually, and how their teams manage stress as a whole. And it's given them hope that it doesn't have to be painful. It doesn't have to be enormously uncomfortable. It can be something that, given the right tools and applying them correctly, or consistently, I should say, not correctly, but consistently, because we're not going to apply all these tools perfectly straight away. We have to allow ourselves the time to practice and repeat and modify, so it does start working for us. It's really opened the door up to things can get much more enjoyable. As you say, we're at the mercy of our stress.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on board, Julie, and I hope there's been some great nuggets for people listening out there. I always sign my book with "May all your stress be the good kind," and that's the thought I think I'll send out to all your listeners.
Oh, that is a wonderful thing. And I'm going to leave links to your website, your book purchase, and everything in the show notes. If a team out there want to actually get you out into their practice and help them, what's the best next step for them?
Definitely go to my website, drlindawilson.com, and you can connect with me through there. I'd love to hear from anybody. Even if you're just having some ideas around what you'd like to do, happy to discuss.
Wonderful. And as I said at the start of the episode, you have trained me in various ways and certainly been a mentor to me, and I recommend you to anybody. You're a magnificent benefit. So thank you so much for sharing your beautiful wisdom with us today.
Thanks so much, Julie. Have a great day.
Hey, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, you should join the club.
The club members receive an online lunch and learn every week where I share insights, systems and strategies to improve the success of your practice. These lunch and learns could not be easier. They are recording so you can watch them at a time that suit you. Members also have full access to the library of all of our past topics. It is a powerful and effective way to upskill your team. I hope to see you there.